Hello and welcome to Let's Fix It in Pod, our little show in the VFX universe. In this episode, we want to take a deep dive into plugins, what they mean for us, and the different flavors they come in. So let's go.
So, Christoph, for this podcast, you look a little bit stressed. Something not working.
Nuke, Flame, you take it. Usually, I want to achieve something, and something gets in the way.
Most of the time, there's a plugin, especially for that. Let's talk about this.
I want to start with a little story. As you know, recently I've been walking down memory lane quite a lot. If you've read my articles on digital production, I did a little rose-tinted glasses view of both the Henry and the Cyborg. And I had to think of one particular instance I didn't mention in the article, and that was on, I think, IBC 2001. I talked to the German sales representative of Quantel, who manufactured the Henry way back when.
Sales rep.
And yeah, sales rep. You have to imagine this kind of little bit sleazy car salesman. And he was always approaching you like you would purchase this 6-figure edit box like it would be nothing more than, let's say, buying yourself a new suit. And he was very casual about that. And I was like, yeah, I could do that, or I could take up a loan on my house for the next 20 years, something like that. So this kind of guy. And he approaches me and he says, well, Mr. Zapletal, what do you expect from Quantel? And I said, yeah, I would really like to see plugin support on the Henry. And if you read the article, you know that has been quite an issue. And he could have addressed it that way. But what he did was he said to me, well, a good artist doesn't need plugins, does he?
Let's be honest. At that time, the companies didn't have a choice to say that, because at the time, all the software was written in such a haphazard way that plugin support or a plugin standard wasn't possible.
When you started your sentence with let's be honest, I feared you were going to say, let's be honest, you are not a good artist.
I remember in the beginning, so one of the first tools I had in my hands was Vegas and Maya at the time. It was an interesting company, and there were plugins for that, but they were really duct tape and chewing gum. So I remember on the Vegas machine, I had to never open anything by never open Word or anything by Office, because otherwise the plugin wouldn't start. And also I couldn't stretch my feet because all the plugins came with a dongle. And the dongles on the back of this particular machine, it was like a heap this long. And it was one VGA connected dongle after the other. Donk, 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 donk. Never stretch your legs. Move slowly, carefully type, because if the dongles fell off, everything fell down.
The Henry I mentioned, as I said, wasn't able to run plugins. It was a proprietary system, custom-built hardware. There was no chance in the world to run any kind of plugin on that. And then another company, 5D Solutions, who was then a plugin manufacturer, you might know the 5D Monsters from then, later Speed 6 Monsters, but that's a different story. And they built a separate computer, rack-mountable computer called the 5D Mesher. So the way this would work, you would open JavaScript on your Quantel machine to load up a plugin, set up the values on the Quantel machine, then your image would be transferred via SDI cable to the Mesher, and all the values would be transmitted by the Java protocol. Then it would get processed on the Mesher in the background, and then the finished clip would be sent back to your Henry.
That sounds reasonably quick and painless in comparing to opening Nukepedia these days.
It's probably roughly the same speed, and yeah, but we'll get to Nukepedia a little bit later on. Another little painstaking process that few of you guys will remember is a couple of years later. I was sitting in front of Flame 2008 or something, and for every
Which year was that?
Yeah, that should be, if it's the 2008 release, it was probably 2007, because somehow Autodesk always releases 1 year before the actual. It's messed up. For every point release, you actually needed to update your plugins. So opting out of maintenance was basically not an option. And then maintenance for plugins was heavy. That was 4 figures just for a year of maintenance, not purchasing the plugins. And you had no option but to stay in, because with every point release, your plugins would be broken. And to put a cherry on that cake, you actually had to run an external script to convert your plugin setups from one version to the other. So yeah, feels like do not stretch your feet.
Thankfully, these days, all the plugins are working perfectly every time, and you never need to update them, and they are flawless.
Now I need to re-record our intro. Welcome to the VFX. Welcome to our show in the VFX multiverse, because what you're describing is not my reality.
Well, some plugins work perfectly all the time. I have a couple of them running that have been running for many, many years, and without any problems. But to be fair, I'm not doing anything with them. So,
but works unless you touch them.
Yeah,
great, just great.
Or coming back to ancient times, that Vegas machine is still up and running. It's not connected to any networks. Nobody's allowed to shut it down or reboot it or anything, but it still works to this day. Well, to this day,
as long as you don't stretch your feet.
No, it doesn't get touched anymore. They got extra long cables for the keyboard and the jog shuttle and for the screen. So this is at that point with cardboard in front of it and big warning signs. So it still works. It still works. So these are workflows concerning a public broadcaster here in Germany. So what else do you expect? But let's leave memory lane a bit, because otherwise I remember when I had not that many gray hairs, because at that time I didn't have any gray hairs at all. But these days it seems like there's either the little plugins that individual artists make and maintain, or there's the big suites, and the big suites are getting smaller or fewer and fewer, not smaller and smaller. They get bigger, but not in the kind of explosion we've seen 5 to 10 years ago.
No, I think you're right. We've seen, I think, the heydays of plugins and really boosting your imagery with plugins was like early 2000s, mid 2000s, and I think
I would go for 2010s or something like that.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah. Yeah,
so when
probably.
You had 1,000 video glitch plugins available from everyone. Basically, your neighbor's dog would program your own video glitch plugin.
Every glitch had its own unique plugin. That's true. Yeah, there were this kind of waves. At one point, every lens flare was its own unique plugin. But we have to give a shout out here to the Null Lens Factory, which I think deserves a special place in history for being the first plugin to really deep dive with so many options, so much configurability. It put everybody else to shame with that. It's really one of the plugins where it was actually an asset as an artist, where you said, yeah, I'm proficient in the Light Factory.
Those are slowing down, and these days, well, we have the Boris guys, we have Red Giant, and the interesting smaller plugins these days are focused, in my opinion, or in as far as I can see it, either on the real-time side of things, like stuff like Unreal or Fab, where there's this is one of the things I watch. I look at every day to see what's happening new, and there is a shit ton of stuff there for very, very little money. And the other side where stuff is happening is Blender and Houdini, and that's about it. The other three tools are in a state of limbo, let's call it that. Even though most of the users of 3ds Max, hi Mike, can't do the limbo anymore. So yeah, these days the development is more in the well, programming focused tools, let's call it that, because Blender is open. Houdini always has been very open, and with their HDA standards, I see things where I thought, why would a second person, even in the same pipeline, use that? Well, Cinema is doing something similar with their capsules, but all of the big ones are outsourcing it to their users. I mean, is that good? Shouldn't the companies do that stuff?
Let's dissect that a little bit. So firstly, you mentioned that the big explosion of plugins somewhat subsided, and I think, well, honestly, if you are the manufacturer of a large suite, then naturally at one point, I wouldn't say you have them all, but like the major needs are met. There are only so many exponential glows you can supply. There are only so many lens flare presets you can supply, and you get the idea. So in the end, at one point, you reach a situation where you say, okay, all the major boxes are checked. Now we really focus in on when there's a need or a technological breakthrough that allows us to do something. So what we've seen with the big supplier of suites, for example, is after this big explosion of plugins, that they suddenly started to focus in on performance. So all the plugins got GPU accelerated, for example, which is a lot of effort on the programming side, but doesn't make for so many shiny new thumbnails on the website. So that's one thing. The other is, at the same time, the software manufacturers of our host applications opened up quite a lot. So let's, for example, take Discrete or Autodesk. At that time was a very, very closed system, and the plugin interface they had was called the Sparks interface, and I alluded to the troubles that brought. And suddenly you had, I think 10 years ago, you had the Matchbox interface opened up, which allowed for OpenGLSL shaders to be programmed by the community, which is a really open standard. Then you had, of course, the introduction to OpenFX. See our episode on industry standards for that, which was a huge improvement for everybody, because now plugin developers, big and small, could code to an open standard and be reasonably sure that it would work in a number of host applications.
I think Matchbox and Sparks, is there really any development there anymore? I'm hearing basically nothing.
First of all, the Sparks interface has been depreciated for a number of years now. It's been replaced by OpenVFX for a number of good reasons. Matchbox is a little bit of a different story. So Matchbox started out really strong around 2015, 2016. It was there before, but then it was also more tightly integrated into the 3D compositing environment of Flame. And there were two people in the Flame community who pushed that really strong. It was a lot of shaders written by Mark Doney and by Eva Baer. And, well, then sometimes really shitty things happen. And that was, in a short amount of time, both of these great people sadly passed away. And as these were single-person endeavors, I mean, Eva just did it for the love of it, and I think Mark charged something like $99 for a lifetime license. So it's really it was really a side business for him. He was a comp artist, and he just developed a few great shaders. And in a time span of 2 years, both of these people died and left a huge hole in the community. The Flame community in of itself is reasonably small. We guesstimated that all in all there are about 20,000 Flame users or something like that around the globe. So it's not like that we've got the numbers of the Nuke community where there are a lot more people contributing. But Matchbox has got one advantage, and that is by design, that it's really open, and they tried to avoid the mistakes they had with the Sparks interface by directly loading the entire Matchbox shader into your script. So the idea is that if you've got a shader in your script and that shader is installed on your machine, and you save away the script and you archive it off and you load it on a different machine that hasn't got the shaders installed, that probably runs on a later version of Flame or whatever, it will still correctly load up because all the source code is inside your Flame script. So this is really neat because it talks to everything, especially backwards, and it's compatible to all future versions. So yesterday I was working on a Flame job, and I used one shader that was designed in 2017, and it just works like a charm. I just took a look at the Matchbox website, and I think since 2020 there were 5 or 6 more shaders added to that. That's not the explosion we had in 2015, 2016, 2017, where there were 20 new shaders every month. So yeah, this thing lives and dies with the community participating in it.
Yeah, and I think this is something we talked about earlier about next generation coming in, and the cool kids with the ideas these days aren't working on Flame anymore. They are either working in game engines, so mainly Unreal and Unity, or they're working Blender. So these are the things where it's accessible to programmers to do something with that. And also there's a difference between 3D world and the 2D video world. There's only a limited amount of lens layers you can use, and that's probable. Whereas in 3D...
But I would concur that in a world of Unreal, it's really hard to find young people who are willing to indulge themselves in the OpenGLSL scripting language.
OpenGLSL, not but OSL, is rather strong. And I think you can match that straight into your engine.
But still, you've got, like with every version, you've got your own unique tweaks. So all the shaders needed to be adapted a little bit to really work inside the Flame framework. So you need somebody who's willing to do that. And yeah, we had Eva and Mark for a couple of years who did that for us. And right now, yeah, that place is vacant. So that's why little is happening with Matchbox shaders.
On the other side, companies like Epic or the Saintly Blender Foundation are providing this thing which Autodesk ignores, because they have people going through the through all the sites where the stuff is hosted, through the fab.com thingy, and making sure this stuff works, or giving the necessary education resources to the programmers, which is why 2 of those programs are exploding and 1 isn't.
I think you can see that it's really paramount that you've got a reasonable openness towards your community, especially if you are in a niche software. So like if you don't spread to every influencer out there, you need to have this openness to maintain your momentum. And that is a lesson some software manufacturers had to learn the hard way. And it's something where it really makes or breaks the deal for them.
Just for clarification, this doesn't mean you have to be a giant company like Epic or something like that. If we look, for example, at Houdini, does a excellent job at that, providing resources in all kinds of ways for their users. I'm currently playing around with their schoolroom in a box thingy, where it's just to get children interested in 3D. They made a complete set of tools, of assets, of scripts and talking points for the classroom, for the tiny one's classroom, available on the site. Or on the other side, there's something like Dolby, who's doing their courses and their certifications, so that you're not just sticking a Dolby Vision sticker on something and hope nobody ever watches it, really, but they have a library of courses, of webinars, of assets, and so on, to learn that. So this is one way of doing it. You can do it in a small way, like Houdini and Dolby are doing it, or you can do it in the big way, like Epic and Blender is doing it, or you can do it not at all, and then see where the software goes.
Or what you could have as an alternative is a passionate community. Now, if you take a look at my other go-to compositing software, Nuke, there is a really passionate community of people developing gizmos or Python scripts or Blink scripts or tool sets. Those are all hosted on Nukepedia, which is not affiliated with the Foundry, but has become the exchange place for these kind of user-developed tools. And they are all free, and there is a load of them. And you'll find a substitute for quite a lot of the plugins you can find in the commercial suites there. The issue being you'll not find one, but rather 50. And dissecting, okay, is this still actively developed? Will this run with my version of Nuke, which is probably not the current version, but depending on the company you're working in, it's one or two versions back. So you'll have to check that. And it's a double-edged sword. So you've got this broad selection, but filtering through those can take some time.
For everybody out there listening, thinking about going this route, the top 5 tips for finding the right plugin for you: check when it's been released, check when it's been updated, check the language of the description, because this can be a problem. Then check that the author is still around and still actively maintaining something. And check 5, does it work in your version? So this is always some swing and miss, swing and hit, maybe this, maybe that, because a load of them haven't been touched in many years.
Once again, this is where the passionate community comes in, and a big shout out to Tony Lyons, who published the Nuke Survival Toolkit. And that basically is what it says on the label. It's the essential gizmos, scripts, toolsets you'll need in your vanilla Nuke. And it's one install, not 120 individual installs. And with the Nuke Survival Toolkit, he aims to maintain a proper documentation. Everybody who's taking a look at it will see a great how to get your plugin used described in there. Then you'll find links to video tutorials if they're available, so it's really nicely maintained. He'll make sure that it works with the corresponding version of Nuke, and he all does that for free. So the Nuke Survival Toolkit is available for free as a download, and we'll link that in the show description.
Yeah, and in the 3D side, these big sets aren't that much of a thing. It's much more fragmented. For example, let's stay with Blender Market. There's thousands and thousands of scripts, of plugins, of scenes, of ready-made assets there, which a lot of them are of the highest quality, and the prices for those are usually quite small. A lot of them are free or pay as you want, which actually I prefer. When I get a plugin, I want to test it for real, and afterwards I pay for it. Because we all had the demo version that is beautiful and works wonderful and then shoots everything. But there's also the downside of that. It's a lot of these things you don't, if you don't do some research, going back to the 5 tips for making sure that you get the right one, is especially if it's assets from somewhere, you're never quite sure if you can actually use them in a commercial surrounding. I've seen this with a couple of unsavory sites. Yes, I visit those as well. And when you see that, oh, I have this and that, and then I think, I've seen those before. Oh no, those are the Kit Bash kits, just with a different pricing, usually less, and with the Kit Bash logos removed. So be wary of that, especially when it comes to assets. Plugins, not so much.
I would say with all these little advantages and disadvantages that we now surmised, I would make the argument, if you are a compositor or editor or 3D artist who finds himself more on the generalist side, having a variety of jobs, then maybe a commercial plugin suite would be more to your taste, because you know it works, you know it'll be updated, and you'll find the occasional plugin fast if you need it. If you are more into a specialized workflow, or the further you get into a specialized workflow, I would say this research into individual and user generated plugins makes much more sense, especially because there's always somebody who had this kind of similar problem that you are facing before you, and probably he was the smarter person in the room and figured out a solution. And if that's available, that half hour or hour you spend researching, is this plugin available, pays off big time.
The more specialized they get, or the more intricate, the less you have a chance of actually writing it yourself, because some of these things are wild. And again, going towards the Blender side of things and the 3D sides, there is a lot of things that are not even that difficult to explain. There are tools to do one job, and you think, well, why hasn't anybody else done that before? But they got there first. Things like the showreel generator, where the shots you see in every showreel are basic generated, because the shots are always the same. But the mental abstraction to see, okay, this is something that can be done once, and then everybody uses that until the style changes. That is something that's happening in some areas. In some areas, it doesn't. But it's always worth a look for, because depending on the severity of the problem, an hour of your research time is better spent than an hour trying to bug fix something that hasn't been working since 1982.
Let's head back to OpenFX for a minute, because it's a great example, and it's also something we discussed in the industry standards episode. These things take time. So OpenFX was released in 2004. And I think the first version of Flame where I saw OpenFX was Flame 2019. And yeah, it takes that long. And honestly, I would say the turning point was around 2015, 16. This is when like really major companies finally got to, okay, let's stitch our own proprietary interface and go with the OpenFX standard. And this is really important by now, because we mentioned the big suites. We mentioned the small individual user-generated plugins, but there's also a third kind, I would say, and that is the industry standard that you just need. And the first one that comes to mind to every comper, at least, is Neat Video. You just need to have that. And yes, there is some stuff happening in the denoising or grain management section of our industry, especially with all the machine learning power tools. But honestly, neat video is still very high at the top and is just really essential to my workflow. It was basically the first plugin I bought when I turned freelance, and I have updated ever since because I just need that thing, and everybody needs that thing. And going back to OpenFX, this is something that really pays off for me as a freelancer with my own workstation, because I've got one license and I can use Neat Video in Nuke, I can use it in Flame, I can use it in Resolve, and have it there every time installed with just one license. So this is something I really appreciate, and compare that to the story I told about the Sparks interface, where you had to update your plugin with every point release.
Yeah, these things, the general toolbox of stuff you need, being available through OFX is great. But I think that a lot more plugin developers need to jump on that wagon, and a lot of more of the host application companies who are charging a horrendous subscription in many cases for their tools need to support it better and faster, and need to make it more available to all the other players in the area. Because what I've seen in the last couple of years, especially companies with is that they are closing this down a bit. They don't do it officially, but the support is not as strong. The resources aren't as well documented and easy to find, and the actual support for developers is going down a bit. In an ideal world, everybody would do OFX first. But these days, it seems like a bit of an afterthought.
This kind of seems like a missed opportunity, because if you take a look at some of the plugins, and I'm using air quotes here, that have been released in the last couple of years, those are full-fledged programs or applications just sitting inside the OFX wrapper. So we've seen a version of Silhouette that is a full-fledged roto paint and compositing solution that you can load in as a plugin. And now we can discuss the merits and advantages and disadvantages of this to the nth degree. But the mere possibility to have that inside your Nuke or Flame or Resolve script, and have that saved away with your session, always attached to your actual host setup, is a big advantage. And it just shows the potential that lives inside OFX, if that is possible.
If they do it correctly.
I call these like the Uber plugins, because they are somewhat more than a plugin, but I still treat them as a plugin. They are quite essential to my workflow, and they just save me the pain of exporting footage in a certain way or saving a script separately and all that. It just streamlines my workflow ever so slightly.
So once you get a real artist and don't need plugins anymore, you can still use them.
That one had to come, didn't it?
Yes, but it has to come later.
Savor the moment, and release the pain at the right time.
For those not being advised by a used car salesman who tells you that three wheels is plenty. So how do you go about doing a plugin list? I think we should talk to somebody who has some actual day-to-day experience and not just clicking on stuff and yelling at the screen.
So we're really happy to have Brian Fox from BorisFX here on our little show. And that's really good, because now we've got somebody who actually knows about plugins. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Hello, Christoph. Hello, Bela. Nice to meet you. My name is Brian Fox. I run the marketing team for BorisFX, right? I'm also the product manager for Sapphire plugins. I've been with Boris for about 10 years. Before that, I worked for GenArts, which makes Sapphire plugins. We were acquired by Boris. Before that, I was I was a video editor, a compositor. I've done a bunch of different roles. I actually started off as a smoke artist, and then I moved on to flame. And then I took a big step backwards and went to Final Cut 7, right? And then worked in After Effects, Premiere, Avid, primarily always in the broadcast world. I've done a lot of live sports, worked for the NFL, done a lot of kind of, broadcast sizzles. That used to be my world. But I always use plugins, right? So I've always kind of loved Sapphire plugins, because coming from a smoke flame world, this is like, that's the joke, right? What is a flame without a spark? Like not too much, right? So I still to this day think Discreet had the best product branding of all time with combustion, flint, flame, smoke, inferno. What were some of the other ones? Wasn't there toxic?
Backdraft.
Yeah. Wasn't there an ice version, or wasn't there?
I think there was something cool. There was something ice. Yeah. And they really built it up. There was some outliers there, like Effect Option 3 or Edit, but usually they try to keep it in the arsenic range.
Yeah, I loved it. I always knew you knew where you stood in the pecking order, based upon your
exactly.
app, right? But so anyway, I always loved the plugins, and I'm from Boston. I was working at a news station in Boston, and I met these guys down the street, Carl Sims and Gary Oberbrunner, who were the creators of Sapphire Sparks. They threw awesome summer parties in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? So I started to go hang out with them, and then I started to kind of QA for them and bug test, and started to go to trade shows, and then a position for product management opened up, and they wanted a kind of non-traditional PM, and so I jumped at that and kind of pivoted industries, and kind of been off and running since then. Now, like I said, most of my life is spreadsheets and Salesforce and HubSpot and some of the automation tools we use, but I've always kind of never wanted to give up the PM side of Sapphire, only because I still use the plugins. I love the plugins. I love talking to customers, right? Because I still am a customer. I'm still using them, kind of for all our marketing tools and, side gigs and, the occasional 6th grade, graduation video that I'm forced to edit, right? But yeah,
that kind of sounds familiar.
Yes, absolutely. The most highly produced graduation video of all time, right? A lot of plugins, a lot of plugins, a lot of Topaz, a lot of Twixtor, a lot of fun stuff. I use them all. I will say, like, when it comes to my philosophy on plugins, I am agnostic. I think it's hard enough to get what's in my brain onto the screen without trying to only use certain tools. I want to use them all. I want to use everything and anything. I want you guys to make something up mid-project for me that makes it easier. So, anything that's out there, I'm into using.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're a freelancer, in one position, you've got them all at one client who's got the whole package, and then you open it up, and it's basically, okay, there's neat video, and that's it, and you're lucky to have that. So, yeah, sometimes you have to go around, but yeah. Then we come back to what's a flame without a spark.
Absolutely. I've always been fortunate to work at facilities that really believed in investing in technology. Like I worked at a news station, right, which had, early 2000s had Smoke and Flame and Maya on Linux, and a lot of fun. They were sick of going out of house and paying small post houses to do redesign and graphic work. So they took it all in house at that point, but early, I think, like, correct thinking that, like, the cheapest thing we can spend is on the tech, and the most expensive thing is on people, right? So, like, if we can save time, let's do it. And I think that kind of follows through to plugins, right? That's our whole philosophy, right? Let's try and do something that the host app can't do or doesn't do well, but more importantly, let's do something that the host app is going to be a 6-step process. Let's get that down to 1 or 2.
So, Brian, it brings me to the first question. How do you decide what's going to be a feature in the next version of the Continuum, also the Sapphire or something like that? How do you pick which video kit you want in there.
Not only is it the first question, that is the question, right? As to like what goes into it. So it's never up to one person, I will say. Like it's always a group effort. There's obviously product managers, but then there's internal content creators, evangelists, like everyone who works at BorisFX is usually connected to the industry in some sort of way. I mean, not everybody, of course. We have people who have come in from outside of post-production, but usually people have worked in the industry at some point, and we don't have a lot of walls internally at the company. Like a support tech can sit in on a Sapphire planning meeting if you want. I always say if you have that part of your job handled, like absolutely. So we don't really silo the effects too well, but we'll come up with an internal list of, okay, like this is an area we think we want to develop. Like I can give you a specific example. So there's a Sapphire effect called Free Lens, which we created, which is like a lens whacking plugin, which is the technique of shooting a DSLR, deconnecting the lens from the body, and trying to hold it together, and you get a really interesting combination of unexpected depth of field, light leaks. You can absolutely ruin your camera very quickly if you don't know what you're doing. But internally we were fans of just looking around and seeing some of these techniques and following different photographers that were doing this type of stuff. So we were like, okay, this is something we want to focus on and we want to maybe go after. And at that point, it's talking to the developers as well, who are a huge part of the process. And I like to say, like, while I sit in the product manager title of Sapphire, really, like Larissa Supnick, who's the chief developer, she's really the product manager of Sapphire. I'm more of a product designer, or just a fan in general of like thinking about what we want to do. But it's more back and forth with the development team and asking, like, is this possible? Like, can we do this? How would we do this? Or it's almost like anything's possible, but it's a balance of time and resources. Sure, that's a great idea. That will take me 5 years with the current team, right? Or that's actually very doable. That's not really that long. It's about, okay, that's maybe a 6 to 8 week development cycle with a couple major milestones, and we should know, halfway through if we're able to get there on time. We're always focused on release schedules. So it's like, where's it going to fit in the schedule? We like to have like, several projects that are long-term, several projects that are ending a long-term. So parallel paths, but different end dates. So it's like, do we have too many long-term projects going on right now? Is this, should we push this off? So once we kind of like get this idea that's possible, now we start to approach customers basically, because nothing's ever going to get developed without, or us just thinking internally, like, this is great. We want to put it in front of artists, and we want to bounce those ideas off people and say, like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about, what do you think about a lens? What do you think about a free lens plugin? Is this something we could use? And we try and balance that kind of product research side. So, we want to talk to a VFX artist. We want to talk to a motion graphic artist. We want to talk to a colorist. I want to talk to an editor. And so we're always to stay connected to the customer, get that feedback, find out, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? I'll talk to any customer at any time, because out of those conversations, they might tell you, like, I would never use that, but like, wouldn't it be great if you could create, a prism lens? Like, I would never do that. But man, the other day I worked on a music video where they shot the whole thing through a prism, and it was, I couldn't really do much about it. I had to roto, talent's face to, drop the prism, or director didn't like this and like that. So it's like that, giving forth those conversations are, kind of can take you in different unexpected places. But, so it's always like, internal ideas. I don't want to put something in front of a customer that before I know, like, the answer of can it be done. So it's like, we're kind of doing that internal research on our own, going back and forth, figuring out can it be done. And then like phase 2, let's start talking to customers. Let's see, is there a need for this? Are people looking for this? By the way, all the time we find out things about the host app that we didn't know. Oh, Flame already has that, and you're not up to speed on this. Or Fusion, if you can do that in Fusion with a really instant step. So, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, they had that idea too. It's it kind of validates the idea. But then it's like, okay, are we going to produce something that's better? Are we going to produce something that's, faster? Or it has to somehow beat it in some ways. So there's a lot of give and take between the host apps like that. We may create an effect that they already have. They may create an effect that we've already done. It's just kind of like the symbiotic nature of plugin host.
When we talk about these different hosts, which are usually different companies, and in a tight race to either world domination or finally having something perfectly usable, and that perfectly was sarcastic. How do you see their development? Is this something that whenever there's a new version of Premiere or Resolve, so what did they destroy of our stuff now, or is it just what tools can we use inside their tool sets to make our stuff better?
All of our host apps are great partners and colleagues and partners in the process. So there's a lot of give and take back. There's a lot of back channeling behind the scenes, a lot of sharing of roadmaps. They're not going to share their whole roadmap as well. But, this is, I will say, what is so great about trade shows and different places where everyone can get together, which we really lost during COVID. Like, it's I don't think, say BorisFX is ever going to go back to a big 20 by 20 booth at NAB because we don't really need that anymore, but we're always going to be at the trade shows, specifically because that's where all our partners are, right? The whole Adobe team is there, the Autodesk team is there, the Blackmagic team is there, and to be able to have meetings with those groups and have everything collected in a time span and exactly that, let them know what we're thinking. Hey, this is what we're thinking, and they'll tell you sometimes they'll say, oh, that's really interesting, we had a similar idea. Right? Or oh, that seems really useful, that's great. Maybe they don't have to go down that road if they know a plugin's going to fill that need as well. And usually as a plugin company, we're usually a bit more nimbler and faster, and we could get to market quicker. And like I said, there's been plenty of times that, as a plugin developer, you've created something, the host app has seen people use it, great. Oh, look at we see usage up, and we're going to add that now into the host app. And that's not a bad thing. That's almost like a validation at that point. And usually at this point, like those host apps, they have so much to do, sure, like has Blackmagic added in lens flares into Resolve? Yeah, absolutely. And they're great. But, they added on and they're moved on to the next thing now, where we're focusing on lens flares, cycle after cycle. Like, how can we improve them? What are some new lenses out there? Let's test some new cameras. Let's try and add some new functionality. Let's talk to artists who are using lens flares. Let's find out what they love. I say it all the time. Like, I love it when people tell me, you love our products. My ego blooms out, right? And it feels great. But like, what I really love is when you tell me you hate them, because that's something I can do something with. There's an action item there, right?
One thing that I would like to know is, so you've got this idea in your development team, and then you've got these two big plugin suites with Boris. There's Continuum and there is Sapphire. So how would you decide where it goes? And by that, could you also describe how they are each both targeted?
BorisFX has 8 products. So I by the way, there's nothing I love better when someone tells me like, oh, I have a problem with my Boris plugin. I'm like, we got to get a little bit more specific, right? All right, let's chew it. Let's narrow it down. So exactly that. Talking about Sapphire and Continuum, like looking at the history, these were separate products. Like I worked for GenArts. We made Sapphire. Boris Continuum is his first plugin set. So they're like almost like two completely separate products with their own history. And at this point, BorisFX is a amalgam of a bunch of different companies together under one kind of shared umbrella and shared kind of roof. At this point, it's GenArts, Imagineer, Silhouette Effects, Syntheyes, Crumple Pop, right? Even Particle Illusion came from Wonder Touch, which was acquired by GenArts, and then with Boris buys GenArts, and he gets Alan and Particle Illusion as well. So each one of those products is its own separate code base, right? With a million decisions that have gone into building that, and truly different philosophies on how to write software, right? So it's a very common question for people to say, like, okay, you have Sapphire, you have Continuum. They're both strong in motion graphics and editing and VFX plugins, and they both do kind of like almost like this, a same customer might be interested in both or be choosing between the two. So why don't you just combine them? And to that, I say, I can create many, many analogies as to why that's a bad idea. But I think the best one is to think of it like it's an engine, or say like Sapphire is a Mercedes with whatever engine comes in a Mercedes. And, over next to it, you have Continuum is a Lexus with whatever engine is. And like how difficult would it be to take that engine out of that Lexus and plop it into the Mercedes? It's possible, right? It would require a lot of work. And at the end of the day, it would just be not something that anyone wants. So they're always going to be separate products just because of where they're at in their histories. Now, where we try and combine them or kind of, merge them two together is with shared technology. So like we may have, like we've integrated Mocha tracking and masking into both. And that makes sense, right? We're about to enter into some interesting tools again in both in the ML world as well, right? So there are certain things you start to see them become similar, like, a similar approach to presets, a similar approach to like philosophies on how to create effects in terms of, say, like, we've always thought very much like, every parameter should mean something. Like the last thing, you want to see is a whole list of controls and infinite options and become wildly confused. So let's really think like long and hard about each parameter. Does it have to be there? What does it do? Like, let's fight for it. So like kind of like shared philosophies like that in the plugins as well. But also we're trying to diverge those products and make them kind of each do their own thing. Like right now, Sapphire is really strong in, like I think of high-end glitzy effects, like things that work well in music videos. Like if you're on a reality show and you're cutting the open sizzle that like first 30 seconds and a producer says to you, like, it has to look different from the rest of the show, this is where you're going to want to come to Sapphire, right? There's a whole bunch of different full screen treatments, stylization effects, glows, glints, glares, all that kind of fun stuff as well. So there's that. And then Continuum is really like almost like a core set of tools that should be in your host app but aren't, so there's lots of things like 3D titling, there's particles, there's advanced image restoration, denoising, keying, like a lot of the ML tools and that are going into Continuum right now with there's a ML motion blur, like these kind of things as well. So it's impossible to ever completely diverge them, but with all of our tools falling under the BorisFX suite at this point, we're trying to eliminate what we eternally call like overlap. Like if I'm going and creating a freelance effect right now, we're communicating with other teams and they may be like, oh, we have that on our roadmap too. And then it's like, okay, well, let's trade some horses here, right? Like who's going to go after that? But let's make sure that it makes sense, and this is especially important when it comes to the other half of my brain, which is like marketing a release, right? Like if I am, coming up for NAB in April and, it's no surprise we'll release, product releases all around NAB in April and then again in November for Black Friday, right? This is like, you can look at our history and see the dates. It's not proprietary info. But like if I'm going to be working on those releases at the same time, I really don't want to have like a glow and a glow, right? I really want to have like two complementary effects. And so it really is like, it's about planning. It's about internal communications between the teams. It's also too like certain things that could be done, in say the Sapphire code base, that might be really hard to do or a lot more difficult and would take a lot more time. But Continuum already has something written, or they have an answer for, like we just ran into this with like Mocha, and Mocha you can track an effect, right? And you can either in Continuum you can apply that mask pre-effect or post-effect, which is like a big difference, right? It's like, okay, do we want to window the effect, or do we want to use those pixels to create the effect as well? And so it came into like looking at Sapphire and being like, ooh, that's a great thing they've done. Well, maybe let's add that in. Does that make sense to add that into both packages? Should both products be able to do that or not? So it's like, it's those type of communications. It's like, at this point, you're never gonna get like a, I don't even know, combined Sapphire and Continuum, Sapphire Inium or something like that into one product. But what you're going to see is them merge into more like distinct packages and less overlap between the two.
So when you think about these as discrete products, wouldn't it be just easier to make them standalone products? Because some of them are, so Syntheyes and Mocha and stuff, can have a standalone thing. Wouldn't it be interesting to have all of them as standalone? And from your perspective as a product guy, do you think it would be useful for people who have single effects as a standalone version? So you basically make your tech stack with standalones.
It's such a great question, and there's so many layers to it. So first off, I will say, like I said, we make at this point 8 products. And I think every single one is a standalone application, but you don't know that, right? So there are always standalone tools that obviously, so Mocha has a standalone app. It always has been. Silhouette is a standalone app. Even Sapphire, Continuum, if you jump into your install folder, you'll see that there are little standalone applications installed in there, such as like the Sapphire effect builder can be run as standalone, which inherently you can use all of Sapphire in there. You just can't render. You could save a preset, but you can't do that. Same thing with Continuum. There are all little like Title Studios, a little standalone that runs in there as well. So there's like, and those are used a lot for internal testing. I can tell you right now, especially when I'm chasing a bug right now, or I'm like just trying to figure out something as well. Like I'm most of the time in the standalone apps, I'm avoiding the host app. But being a plugin has some major advantages. Like for instance, like we get a lot of things for free, right? We don't have to worry about rendering, right? I don't have to worry about media formats. It's like I say it all the time. It's like, I look at it like this. As a plugin, you can cheat on so many corners that you can't as a standalone. How many times do I have people say like, oh, well, we think there's a problem with rendering ProRes, on Continuum in After Effects, and I say, it's not my problem. It's like that's if you could. I always say to people like, oh, try it without the plugin and then see if you still have the problem, or it really isn't. And not so with a standalone, right? Standalone, now you own all that, right? Good and bad. So now you're talking about supporting all the different formats. You're talking about owning the whole pipeline. So that's why I don't know if you'll ever probably see, or I'll never say never, but like a fully standalone version of Continuum or Sapphire or all that. That's always plugins as well, but there are our own little internal versions that we use a lot, but they're just not doing the hard stuff. And then there's of course our full applications: Mocha, Silhouette, Syntheyes, Particle Illusion has a standalone at this point as well. So, and those are important, because a lot of the times those tools or companies or individuals, like you don't want to have to use a host app. You may be buying the plugin because exactly that, you want to eliminate the need for a host app. You want to rotoscope a shot and you do not want to have, or you're going to pay someone to do that and you don't want to pay for a seat of Nuke when all they're going to do is rotoscope. So you can get Silhouette for a lot cheaper and it's more specialized and it does more tools as well. Or same thing with Mocha, right? You want to have somebody do some tracking and you want to pass that standalone around, maybe with a floating license or something like that, and you don't want to have 100 seats of Nuke, as well. So there is advantages to those standalones as well.
Couple of comments from my artist's point of view. So firstly, no, I probably don't want to build my glint and glow in separate apps. That would be like setup nightmare on my file structure. I think for something like we've seen with the release of Twixtor as a standalone, that makes sense because it's render heavy. And of course, as you illustrated, something like Silhouette, it also makes sense to have that as a standalone app. That being said, what I really do love about these kind of Uber plugins, as I like to call them, is to have my, for example, my Silhouette or my Mocha script directly attached to my Flame script, my Nuke script, or whatever, having saved that away, not having to worry about different iterations and all that. So yeah, there are benefits. I always feel like the standalone apps are a little bit more responsive, little snappier. But the plugin versions usually help me in regards to workflow.
It's funny that as a plugin, you get to cheat a lot at, being inside of a host app. You get a lot for free, but you're in another sandbox, right? You're in somebody else's backyard, and there are many limitations with that as well. That you're correct when you say that like the standalone apps feel snappier. That's because we own the whole code base, right? We own everything from start to finish. Internally we can run Sapphire like without a host app, which we do. And, it's a faster than real-time effect. What's the biggest knock against, Sapphire plugins is like, oh, you're not fast enough. You'll talk to a colorist and they'll be like, oh, your lens flares is only 20 frames per second. And I'm like, amazing. And they're like, no, not amazing at all. But internally, it's a blazing fast code base, so maybe there is an argument to be made at some point for like freeing yourself of kind of like the good and the bad that comes with a host app. And we have had, some of our ML tools right now, I think could make a lot of sense for having a standalone version because, they can be very slow to render or very time consuming to render, worth it. But, and maybe you don't want to tie up your host app, you want to work in your host app and you want to save that setup, bounce out and round trip. Like, yeah, I could absolutely see that. And we've had that conversations, internally. It's just, nothing concrete on the horizon as of yet. But, if it makes sense, we're going to do it.
As an artist, you've got this idea, okay, now there's OFX, so basically it's one wrapper to put your plugin in, and that's it. The way you talk about how I'm getting to the air quotes. The way you told this, it gives you the suspicion that this is not as an easy process.
Yes. True. I mean, if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? No, sure. It's so with OFX in particular, and I will say I'm a huge believer. I should have an OFX tattoo on my back or something, right? Like GenArts was I'm a huge open source guy as well. I think it just makes sense, right? In overall, and especially like in the OFX world where it's like, so what we're talking about is not writing to a specific host application's API, writing to a shared open format standard. And now we say only have to write Sapphire once for Flame, for Resolve, for Vegas, for Mystica, for Rio. We go for all the different ones. But there is always, I mean, so there's something, this makes complete sense to me versus writing specifically for Avid, for AVX, right? Specific for writing for Adobe, specific API as well. From a plugin developer, this is the dream, right? Because you can imagine we support 3 different OSs. We support 3 different APIs. We have standalones as well versus plugins, versions of different OSs. I mean, during this podcast, you know, Mac has probably released a new version, right? So like trying to keep up with that, Silicon native processing, ARM, like there's so much to do. I like to say that.
And then somebody says, shouldn't we do a mobile version of that?
Do a mobile version? Oh, somebody do a real-time version? Actually, what about Unreal? Do you support Unreal? I will say, like, you know, what I've loved about every job in my career, and it was the same in post, is it is not a lack of things to do. I feel like I blink and it's, you know, the end of the day, and I'm more have a problem shutting off my brain from thinking about it constantly, which is, I would much rather be there than staring at a clock and wondering, like, you know, how am I going to fill my time? There's so much to do and so much to handle. But when it comes to something like OFX, it's like this is the dream, right? This is one ring to rule them all, right? It is one API. But of course, in reality, it doesn't play out like that, right? It plays out in the ways of, like, every host app still has to implement the APIs, and some are better than others at it. Some are like will put in the OFX API and then not touch it for many versions. Some are actively working on it, and so it comes out to be a better, it's definitely more positive and a better approach. But is it the dream that I think about, you know, when I'm alone? No, of course not. There's still, like, you know, Flame OFX is a little different than Resolve's OFX, is drastically different than Magic's OFX, right? Which is, you know, the Assimilate guys do it a little bit like this. You know, SGO does it kind of over here like this. So what we have to do is, because you have to understand, you know, we sell, like, you know, very expensive professional software, and we support that. And with OFX, like, you know, like us 3 could create an app and, you know, put the OFX shim in there and say, hey, guess what? Like, you know, Sapphire works. So when it comes to support, we will have an official list of supported OFX apps and say, like, hey, these, and what I mean by that is, like, these are the ones we test. Like, these are the ones internally we are QAing on, you know, and these are the major ones. And these are the ones that our companies we're working with, you know, to constantly improve it. And when you buy this product and you buy this OFX application for a specific host apps, you know that it is supported by us. We're testing it. If a problem arises, as problems always do, we're gonna fix it, right? And we're gonna, you know, release a point version. We're gonna patch that. And then there is obviously a whole bunch of other OFX apps which fall under, like I say, like, take the trial, try it out, let us know. I don't, you know, like we think it works, but at the same time, we're not, you know, like, we're a bunch of software developers and a bunch of video nerds too, but no one is, you know, sitting in front of a Mystica for 8 hours today, you know? So, like, you're going to find things that, you know, we may not know about. So those are what we call unsupported. And we'll say, like, you know, absolutely, you're more than welcome to buy it. You're more than welcome to take the trial. But there's no promise from us that, like, we're going to get around to fixing an issue if it arises until it falls into that supported category. Do we fix issues all the time for unsupported host apps? Of course, right? Are we talking to those companies too to try and get them to support it, to support its status? Absolutely. It's just like, you have to imagine, if it's going to push comes to shove, and I have 6 issues in Flame to fix and 3 issues into Resolve, those have to be prioritized, right? You have to have some sort of priority. And I always like to say, in a world of infinite cycles, we would do it all the time, right? But we don't live in that world yet, so it's like we have to prioritize.
Does Unreal and Unity support OFX?
Oh, no, not yet. I would love them to. I would absolutely love them to. We run into, I mean, there's some big time issues with their licensing. right? Which is like, similar to there are OpenGL shaders that you can put in there, similar to like Matchbox and Flame, right, as well. But same thing with Matchbox. A big question, people have asked me all the time in the Flame world is why isn't there a Sapphire Matchbox? And it's like, well, simply put, licensing, right? There's no licensing in that. I could. The great Ivar Beer, right? Many conversations, many late night. Rest in peace, Ivar. But I miss our conversations. He had no problems Facebook messaging me at 3:00 in the morning, and always so complimentary. Always like, I love Sapphire Distort. I can't figure out how you get the filtering. Please explain it to me. And I'll be like, no. He'll be like, your glow, I figured out. I can't figure out Distort as well. So, but this is where it comes down to, right now that doesn't really fit into the Unreal model. You want to be in the marketplace, right? You want to sell in the marketplace as well, but there's nothing to stop someone from buying X shader and, copying and pasting and handing it into different installs. If they were to add it in, I'd be all over that very quickly. They would be a supported host very, very fast, I would say. But they also want aggressive performance in there as well. So
it's real-time stuff.
Yep, another great partner to meet at trade shows. In terms of that, it is an exciting product, I will say, in like the future of everything.
Let me ask you. At some point, every suite gets more and more plugins added over time. But at some point, you might get to the decision to depreciate one or two plugins. How do you decide, or are you even aware which ones have done that?
These are hard ones, and these are, you can imagine, internal debates. I will say lively discourse happens behind the scenes. Yes, Sapphire has, I don't even know at this point, there's more than 280 plugins, 3,000 presets. Continuum was up to like 325. Continuum has a long history of aggressively deprecating. And so because, it's just a different philosophy. We've yet to deprecate any Sapphire plugin ever. It is something we think a lot about right now, to kind of why you're thinking, Christoph. It becomes almost, paralysis by analysis at some point. Like, what am I looking at? I don't know where to go. There's much too many. With Continuum and Sapphire both, when we deprecate a plugin, we're really never deleting anything. We're just hiding it from the view, because we live in a world where there's an After Effects artist at Entertainment Tonight that created a setup 7 years ago, and they're going to open it up and put it in tomorrow. And if, preset glint rainbow number 3 is not working, like, we're going to get a support call, which I agree with. That they should reach out to us. It's like backwards compatibility is paramount to almost everything we do. Like, do we get it right all the time? No, right? But of course, like, we try. That's part of the goal. So yeah, if ever there is something deprecated, it's just hidden. We have deprecated a ton of presets. Like, there is, at one point in GenArt's history, there was an individual who was tasked with just create presets like as fast as you can, right? And like, as we know, that looks good on marketing documents and websites and all that, but that's, we spent about 2 years ago internally, Ben Brownlee, John Dickinson, and myself, right, who are all big users, sat down with a spreadsheet, and we're like, we're gonna all on our own look at every single preset. And like, it was like the Coliseum. It was like thumbs up or thumbs down. Like, if you get, it was great because there were just 3 of us. So it was never an argument. It was either all in agreement, all in disagreement, or, this and that. And then if it was, there were cases to be made, but we did that kind of, we called it the culling, when we went through and really took took a broad, stroke at everything. And then at the same time, that was actually an amazing process because we started to look at areas and realize like, oh wow, gradients presets are awful. Like no one's ever looked at this. Like why aren't there basic color combinations in here? Like why aren't we have complementary colors? And John's like, I'm gonna do this tonight. Like so that was a good process. But again, same thing. All those presets, they're still there. They're just hidden, and you actually can show the deprecated presets if you want to like ignore our work. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but it is, we put that there specifically for if there was a preset that someone liked out there, loved it, and they came in and looked and said, my favorite preset is missing now. We can always say, open up the preset browser, click info settings, and there's a little show deprecated presets box as well there, and you're good to go. And that's kind of an ongoing process too. We're always... we're looking at those presets now. We have Sapphire pretty much under control. We're doing the similar thing with Continuum as well. We're always looking at them and kind of making sure. Like, I mean, I'll tell you right now, it's like, not to get in too much of the sales side, but you can imagine when it comes to a plugin, like we work so hard to get you to take that trial. Like that's the goal, right? Is to convince you to show off the product, show what it can do. And bring, it's almost like the marketing and sales' whole job is to bring you the trial and then hand you the trial. And if we're lucky enough for that all to work, and then you throw that plugin on and then you hit load preset, and it's like, it's a ton of presets that don't seem useful to you. Like it's like all that work is gone, right? Because now you've moved on. You've said, oh, this isn't for me, right? Like, or this effect, I don't really like this as well. So that's kind of why we spend time looking at those, and the new ones we're creating. There's an internal debate that goes on as well. Like, this is the fun stuff about when we get to this part of the release. Like, it's almost like the meal is cooked, right? It's on the table, right? And now we can all start to, enjoy it and, start to make those and debate. That always happens in the last kind of, month right before release, creating those new presets. And then as we even use them internally in the months post-release, we're creating new presets. Once we get it out into the public, we have relationships with different content creators who create presets for us or create presets for themselves and, swap them over for us, and we'll add them in the new release as well.
You guys are doing or starting with the machine learning tools within the suite with the trackers and the mask and so on. What I always thought, where do you get the training data and how do you decide which parts are worth training on?
In fact, I should just hit end podcast right now. Everything we do at BorisFX is we call it's like artist assisted tools, right? So it's ways for us to accomplish a task that we could never do before, but there's nothing we ever create or envision like a human not using. Like, I think it's a fair point to say that like you might be on the side of you just took something that took maybe 5 humans down to 1 human as well. I think that's a fair criticism, but that's also like technology, right? And that's just, it's development, right? That's our whole goal as well. But like I said, everything we do is falls under that assist tool. You can imagine, Boris, Yamanitsky, who's CEO of Boris, is a man. He's a developer. He still writes code, right? He's, he looks at you with a glint in his eye, right? And when he says that, like, I've been involved in these type of, like periods of rapid growth before, and this is another one. This is fun times to be writing code during this, where everything's changing in terms of how we do develop internally. It's been a pretty big investment. That's the thing I will say that I don't think a lot of people understand is like, while, there is probably no hotter job right now than an ML engineer and an ML developer. So securing talent is a big investment. I've seen the team grow internally, which is fantastic as well. I mean, we even have, I'll talk about our training in a little bit, but we do have our own little internal data center that we've created, which has a a big 6 GPU Linux box, right? Which is, probably could heat this whole house I'm in right now if it didn't as well. And, we're absolutely, I will say, obsessed with being on the right side of the ethical argument and that is like, of course, internally as humans, like we all like want to be, ethically correct in terms of, like all of these decisions that are going in and being made on a lightning, like, kind of quick pace right now. But on the other hand, from a selfish, like self-sustaining view, like we sell tools to artists, like we're not looking to, like the analogy would be like we're not a vegan restaurant who's going to try selling hamburgers. Like it's like these are the people who are have bought our tools, have invested in, who trust us, right, who want us to make these decisions. And it's like we haven't spent years building those relationships with customers and companies to just throw all that away at the next shiny kind of thing that flies by. So when it comes to training data, we're absolutely sourcing everything ourselves, or trying our best to source everything ourselves. Like we've made decisions in the past to license stock footage libraries, right? And we now have moved away from that a little bit because that's a little murky gray area. Like, so that footage that you sold us, did the DP who shot that know that they were going to be used in a training set? Did the actress know? I mean, I can start with a high level. Like nothing we do has any sort of scraping of the internet. Like that's like the number one thing that like we're never going to do. But we do want, and you can imagine we work with companies at this point who are large companies who want to know everything about our training data, right? Where did you get this? Like, where are these images coming from? Where, like, you're creating these pixels. Like, what are they being created from, right? So everything internally is shot. Luckily we have internal DPs. Like Ben Brownlee, who's our director of content. Has a very expensive hobby of glass, and cameras, right? And as we all know, it's, one might say, the most expensive hobby, except if you're into like F1 or something. But audio
still tops everything.
all the good hobbies are expensive. This is the type of things we're going and acquiring these things. We're working with individuals to acquire that. Certain ones can be difficult. Like, we needed some license plates, specifically, and we needed a whole bunch of them. And you can imagine we're going out and shooting them at some point, but then it's like we need a lot, and we need, say, like multiples. So these are where we may still license, the individual set of footage. But at this point, we're now trying to license things that were intended for data sets and training.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for being part of the show. That was a great conversation, and I think you shed some insights into all the processes that go into the tools that we use every day. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Bela. Thanks for having me. No, this is great. I'm sorry I talked your ear off too much. As you can see, I tend to go on and on. I will tell everyone, I will tell you the one thing I'm heavily pitching nowadays is BorisFX has a Discord. So if anybody's interested out there, we have our own forums. Discord is new. Come check us out on the Discord. We're in there all the time. Ben and the team. Russ from Syntheyes is doing like impromptu Ask Me Anythings in our Discord. So Discord is fun for us. I sound like an old man talking about like that it's new, but yeah, definitely come check us out on the BorisFX Discord. It's a great little community that's growing.
Well, these two old guys will surely drop it in the show notes.
That was that, but there's other things happening as well. One of the things I wanted to tell you about, which I find quite interesting, is something Datacolor is doing. Datacolor, we know them from their colorimeters, where you measure the color of your screen and try to get accurate colors. So they worked with another company, which they bought out some time ago, and now they have a new product. and it's called the light meter, the light color meter, which is basically a little camera looking not on the screen but outside, telling you which light temperature you have, which colors and so forth in the light. This is going to be amazing for on-set because it has a second feature, which I haven't told you about. You can have more than one. They're quite small, about the size of a mobile mouse or something like that. They fit in the palm of your hands. You can clip them to multiple things, and when you're on set, you're never going to have to guess which lamp is going to have which color. So this is coming out. Have a look at it. It's great, and in a couple of days or weeks, you're going to see a big test in digital production. So that's the hardware side. What's happening in software?
On the software side, we've got two major releases. The first one would be Nuke 16, which is out now. It's got a big new introduction with multi-shot, which heavily relies in part on live groups, but is much more about setting up variables for your project. It will be a TD's dream, and I think this is a feature that will really live up inside of bigger facilities where you can really script how your shots should be set up. Another feature that a lot of artists probably have looked forward to is faster roto. So we've seen this demo of the Foundry where they had so many different roto shapes animated at the same time. It looked like a big chunk of Lucky Charms, but it really showed an impressive performance on the roto node. So if you are a Nuke user, you really will look forward to that. The other software side is once again concerning BorisFX. BorisFX has released Syntheyes 2025, and they've got a couple of great features in there. We've got the mask ML that our guest Brian Fox already mentioned. We also got a lot of dynamic tagging for file paths, and we've got a multi-export, which is really great for deliverables, where you can set up what kind of exports out of your match move you want, including what kind of geometry to include, which kind of supplementary files, trackers, geometry, all that can be individually defined and saved as a preset for your future exports. This is just a rough overview. We are keeping this new releases segment really, really short today. More details will be linked in the show notes, but we've got one more topic that we want to address, and that is to concern the current state of the industry. And I think by far the saddest news in the last couple of days was, of course, the closure or the failure of Technicolor.
We wouldn't be concerned with Technicolor, but as you know, inside Technicolor there was the mill and there was MPC and some other companies who were doing great work, where friends of ours worked. So far that's quite sad, because now these people are out of a job, and because it's one of the old houses closing down. MPC was getting the first Oscar for VFX for Gladiator many moons ago. And yeah, they've been doing great work, but well, this sucks. But this brought us to another point. How do you prepare for that?
If you are an artist and are in fear that this might happen to you at some point in the future, we collected a little bag of advice and how-tos for you to prepare.
Basically, it's going to be three things. One is to be reachable. One is to be to know when people are talking about you or your company. And the third is to stay informed of all things happening in the industry without spending as much time as we do with that. In the TLDR version, get a website, get an RSS reader, and learn about Google Alerts. The first thing that you should have in some way is a website. You might think that, oh, I'm active on social media and so forth. Social media waves and wanes like anything else. So you want something that you yourself control, where you don't have to do a portal for that. You don't have to do news or something like that. But what you have to have is some kind of showreel and some way of for people to contact you. This is not to be some web designer thingy or something. This is just a contact card on the web. This was the presenting outside. Let's go to the part where you're looking what people are saying about you. Google Alerts are one of the oldest products from Google, which is basically just always search, or every hour search for this thing I'm saying and alert me in some way when something's happening. The site is google.com/alerts. You log in with your usual credentials and then you tell it to search for something. So in this case, I'm going to go for fix it in pot, and that's basically it. And then there's going to be the thing with the options. So you tell it to send it to you whenever it finds something. The sources should be automatically. You can look for just for videos or just in news things or just on the web or just in Google Finance, but give it everything, give it all the languages, give it all the regions, and tell it to show you all the results. And then you can do two things. Either you can say, write me an email if you want to, or you can say, give me that as an RSS feed. And this is going to feed into the next thing I'm going to show you in just a minute. But the idea with the alerts is quite simple. If there is something that is talked about, you should know it as well. And for example, obviously you search for your name or for your artist's name. If you have a handle on social media, you can look for that, and doesn't cost a thing. And if it triggers, you're going to see it very, very soon. So if there is some mentioning somewhere of the company you're working in, you're going to see that.
Also, if you worked on a show and it has not been released yet, this is the best way to stay on top of any news you might want to share for that. So if a trailer gets launched, if a release date is set, if it's clear where it's going to be streamed, that way you're going to know first and can share that inside your community, and that way get additional attention. So you mentioned that you can set this up as an RSS feed. Where would I want to send that?
So RSS feed is one of the most amazing technologies on the whole web, and people aren't using it anymore. So what RSS stands for is really simple syndication. RSS is a way to read new stuff on a website whenever it gets published. So this means that you can have news sites, that you can have that you can track websites, that you can see Google News or Facebook pages or Reddit feeds or Telegram channels or newsletters or anything that gets published and you don't want to visit the site, you can have it in an RSS feed. So it works that it's automatically generated by the website, by the web server. Most of the sites do it, even if sometimes the people publishing on the website don't know it, because it's a very old feature. On the other side of it, you need a feed reader, which is something that collates all these feeds and pings them every 24 hours, every 12 hours. Do you have something new? If there is, it gets formatted in a very easy to read way, which is basically just strip out all the design, give me the text and the relevant pictures. So it's a good way to have a fast overview over loads and loads and loads and loads of topics. I'm going to show you how to set this up with a software called inoreader.com, INO, and then reader.com. It looks like this, and now on the screen I'm showing the RSS feed for digitalproduction.com. There is different ways of showing this, and this is for every feed reader. It's a little bit different, but the principle is always the same. You have your news, and for example, because it's digital production, there is good news. I see this as cards. For an overview, I can also do a list. Let's go for the list view. So you see, this is the publishing feed, in this case digital production. You see when it was published, so you can filter, delete anything older than a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever. And on the left side you have the source, so you can see what happened in your sources. When you go onto the item. So here's the good news. And then you see it's just the title, the publishing magazine, the author in this case. There is sharing and saving for the podcast. We did a collection which I recommend, which I'll import right now. Let's start. You can have a free account, and usually if you just want to have some overview, a free account will do you nicely. You don't need to spend money on this. So then you're going to add the feeds. Again, it's going to be named something differently, import or something like that. Then you go to add and import feeds. And then you're going to drag the XML file that you can download below this episode or on digitalproduction.com. Drag it in. Click import file. And then it should be done. So after we imported that, after a little while, you're going to see all these magazines in there. And this is just a personal recommendation. You will find many, many others. So why are we doing this? It's quite simple. You want to have an overview what's happening on all the magazines out there. And you want to see what's happening out there without spending too much time on it and going to 20 different sites each and every day. So, for example, in our collection, which we recommend, there's Digital Production, obviously. There's the RSS feed for the YouTube version of our show, if you want to see our lovely faces and our interview guests. Then there's the Animation World magazine, Cartoon Brew, Motion Grabber, Post Perspective, XKCD, because we all need a giggle every once in a while. There's Compositing Academies, 3DVF, FX PhD, Post Magazine, and quite a few others. And since you're gonna add the things you are interested in, that's gonna be helpful because you're gonna find out all about Nuke or about Flame or something like that. Because in all of these things, you can have searches and they have collections of things that might interest you, industry insights, hobby and lifestyle, whatever. And then you can subscribe to single feeds you generate yourself. And this is where we're going to jump back to Google Alerts, have our send as an RSS feed, set the alert, and then you're going to see this little symbol for the listeners. It's a little dot with 2 quarter rings in it. You have seen this online, definitely. And you're going to click that. And then you're going to get an address, which is google.com/alerts/feeds, and then a long, long number. And this is just a link to an XML file. This is what you're going to copy. So you're just going to paste in this thing, this long, long, long number, and then you're going to follow that. And whenever something is published with one of the things you are interested in, quite soon you're going to get a notification and you're going to see what's happening. And in addition to that, there's loads of comic feeds and fun stuff to brighten the day a bit.
Yeah, Bela has got 9,000 feeds for his cat pictures alone.
Yeah, but that's just the cat pictures, not the business stuff.
I know. You've got to set priorities. I'm perfectly aware. Hope to see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.